My prince, forgive me. These old legs are too weak to move any faster.
If old age has made you useless, then stay off my road.
Don't worry, my prince. My God will judge you.
When King Echezeku and Queen Adama left Umuafo for the neighboring kingdom of Ogboru, on which they would stay for 3 days to attend rites owed to an old alliance and friend, they left the affairs of the kingdom in the hands of their now-grown son, an arrogant prince who grew up believing he was the only son of the king, because the king and his queen had hidden everything about the twins so well that nobody knew, or so they thought. Judge fairly, the king told him before he left, and judge slowly. A crown is easiest to misuse when its owner is in a hurry. Chukwuemeka nodded as though he understood. In his heart, he believed he already ruled better than his father did, more decisively, more certainly, without the endless second-guessing that seemed to weigh on Ezechukwu like a stone tied to his ankle. He did not wait long to prove it. On the second morning of his father's absence, Chukwuemeka rode through the village market road on the king's own horse, 4 armed guards jogging to keep pace beside him. Villagers scattered at the sound of hooves, not because anyone ordered them to, but because 16 years of watching this particular prince pass by had taught them it was safer not to be in his way. An old woman was not fast enough. She was bent almost double under a bundle of firewood, and by the time she heard the horse, there was nowhere left to step that did not put her in its path. A guard caught her arm and hauled her aside before the horse reached her. He did it roughly, like she was a bag of beans, and her firewood scattered across the red earth. Chukwuemeka did not slow his horse or show any sympathy. "Tell her to watch the road next time instead of the ground in front of her feet," he said over his shoulder in a careless manner. He did not look at her face. He did not see the way she gathered her scattered wood in silence, hands trembling, saying nothing, because there was nothing a poor old woman could say to a prince who felt that others were less human. He believed as he rode on that he had been perfectly right. In his mind, the road belonged to the king's business. The old woman's firewood did not. By midday, a small crowd had gathered outside the palace gate. An accused man kneeling in the dust, with his wife and son behind him, and Chief Okezi, one of the respected men of the kingdom, standing over them all, with the practiced grief of a man who had rehearsed his outrage in front of a mirror. "My prince," Okezi began, "this family stole the yams and the ram set aside for the harvest offering, tribute I held in trust for the whole village, meant for the shrine at the next full moon. I found the ram's hide buried behind their own barn." A murmur moved through the onlookers. Stealing from a man's barn was one crime. Stealing from the gods was another. Ikemba, the accused man, pressed his forehead to the ground. "My prince, I would never touch what belongs to the shrine. I have prayed at that shrine my whole life." "But the evidence says otherwise," Chukwuemeka said. He did not ask how a ram's hide had come to be buried behind a poor farmer's barn, instead of being eaten, sold, or burned, the way any thief in a hurry might have done. He did not ask why a poor man like Ikemba, devout enough to fear the gods, would risk their anger over one animal. He asked nothing at all, because he did not believe there was anything left worth asking. If the offering is not restored by the next full moon, the gods will hold this whole village responsible for what this family has done. Take their farmland to replace what was stolen. Let them pay the price of angering the gods. Ikemba's wife wept into her wrapper, but it was Namdi, their son, who lifted his head. "We are not thieves," he said loudly. "Search my father's whole life. He has never taken so much as a yam that was not his own." "It seems you forgot yourself to shout before a prince," Chukwuemeka said sternly. I forgot nothing. I only refused to kneel for a lie. Chukwuemeka hurriedly dismissed the case, saying he would look into the matter more carefully. But that evening, an elder named Dike came to Chukwuemeka's chambers, uninvited and unannounced, which in itself told the prince something. "My prince, a word of caution," Dike said. "Chief Okezi has friends among every titled man in 3 villages. If you begin asking questions about him and find nothing, you will have made a powerful enemy for no reason at all. If you find something and cannot prove it, you will have made an enemy who has already won." Chukwuemeka said nothing to that. But that night, for the first time since the judgment, sleep did not come easily. He told himself the boy's stubbornness meant nothing. He told himself the chief's grief had looked genuine enough. He almost believed it, until the part of him that still wanted to be fair refused to let the matter rest. He rode out before dawn, alone, to the boundary between Okezi's compound and the farmer's land, and found what he had hoped not to find, a second ram alive and well, tethered behind Okezi's own barn, marked with the same clipped ear pattern the shrine keeper used for every animal set aside as tribute. Okezi had never lost any ram at all. He found the shrine keeper and paid him well enough to get truth out of him. "Chief Okezi asked me to mark a second animal from his own herd," the man admitted. "When I asked him why, he said it was none of my business." Chukwuemeka sat on his horse a long time before riding back. Dike's warning had not been wrong. Exposing Okezi now meant making an enemy with friends in 3 villages, while the one man who could shield him from the consequences was still 2 days from home. But doing nothing meant an innocent family lost their land for a crime that had never happened at all. Pride told him it would be simpler to let the matter rest, since he has already given his judgment. Something else, quieter and calm, told him simple was not the same as right. He returned to the courtyard the next morning and called for all 3 parties again. "The ram was never stolen," he announced, loud enough for every gathered face to hear. Chief Okezi marked a second animal from his own herd and buried a hide to make it look like theft, just because he wanted this family's farmland, which is very near to his own, more than he wanted the truth. Okezi's face drained of color. Around the courtyard, men who called him a friend went very still, the way men do when deciding which way to lean before a thing is finished. "The land remains with its rightful owners," Chukwuemeka said. "Chief Okezi will answer to my father when he returns, and to the shrine for treating its offerings as a tool for his own greed." Ikemba's wife wept with relief this time, not grief. Nnamdi only said, "Thank you," and nothing more. Chukwuemeka nodded proudly. Already certain history would remember this as the day a wise young prince had seen through a liar, not as the day he had nearly destroyed an innocent family for refusing to kneel quietly enough. He walked away, still believing himself to be better than the farmer he had just spared. His pride was a crack in his character, nothing more. But cracks, once they exist, do not close on their own. Old Nwamaka had watched all of it from the edge of the palace courtyard, the way she watched most things now, unnoticed and easily overlooked. 16 years ago, she was the second midwife in that birthing room. She was not this old then, and was only trusted to hand cloths and boil water, while a more senior woman did the difficult work. She remembered the queen's labor that went on long past what was normal. She remembered the terrible quietness after the delivery. No crier was sent to announce the child's arrival to the compound. No drums, no woman ululating in the courtyard the way custom demanded for the birth of a prince, and a birth the whole kingdom had waited 15 years to hear. And she remembered that the senior midwife who delivered that child left the palace before sunrise and never came home again. And no one, not the king, not a single guard, ever spoke of her afterward, as though she had never existed at all. For 16 years, Umuamaka had told herself she misremembered, that her mind and old age was just playing games with her. But watching Chukwuemeka stride away from the courtyard, exactly the age that strange night would have made him, something in her finally refused to be told that any longer. That night, she opened a small clay pot she had kept sealed at the back of her sleeping mat since the year of the prince's birth. A pot she had told herself every year since that she would empty and forget. Inside were 2 beaded bands, identical, small enough to circle an infant's wrist. She had strung them herself that night, one for each child the midwives had been preparing to bless, before the household went silent around her, before there was suddenly only one son left to name, and no one who would explain what had become of the other son. The king and queen were 2 days from home. She wrapped the bands in a scrap of cloth, and in the hour before dawn, when the palace slept its deepest, she slipped into the queen's private chamber and placed them inside the small carved box where Adamma kept the few things she had saved from her son's birth. Then she withdrew and said nothing to anyone at all. The king and queen returned 2 days later, tired from the journey and glad to be home. That evening, alone in her chamber, Adamma opened the carved box out of habit more than needed. She opened it most weeks just to touch the few small things she had left from the night of her birth. Her hand found the bands before her eyes did. She went very still. 2 bands, identical, small enough for an infant's wrist. She had never placed them there. She had never seen them before in her life. And yet, she knew, the way a mother knows her own child's cry in a crowded market, that this was from the night she gave birth to the twins. She carried them to King Ezekichukwu without a word and watched her husband's face change the way hers had changed. "Someone knows," she whispered. "After 16 years, someone knows somehow that we actually gave birth to twins." From the doorway of the outer hall, unseen in the shadow of the palace wall, old Umuamaka watched the king and queen's faces crumple into something between grief and terror. She did not step forward. She did not explain herself. She only watched, her own face giving nothing away, while 16 years of doubt finally settled into something she no longer needed anyone to confirm. The prince had a twin, and somewhere, whether the king and queen knew it yet or not, the truth had already begun to come home.